All right, guys. So our two main objectives today. Number one, we're going to talk about MLA. I understand most of you probably have some kind of working knowledge of MLA, and I can also pretty safely assume some of you have no idea what that is. I know when I got to college, I think we were like 3 weeks into class, and my English professor said, "All right, so blah blah blah. Why aren't some of you using MLA?" Like, and we all just looked at each other like, what is that? So I never assume that everyone knows what it is. So we're going to do that right now. After that, the bulk of this video is actually going to be spent, you can see the title there, Quotation Workshop. We're going to talk about your homework, which at the time I'm recording and posting this video on Monday, the 17th, your homework's actually due tomorrow, but if you happen to watch it then, whatever the case, the homework we're going to talk about is your homework that's due on the 18th. We're going to build on that for next time. That'll make more sense when we get there. Okay, let's get into it. MLA, fun times. To begin with, I want to start every word processor. And a word processor, by the way, this is what you're looking at right here. It's Microsoft Word, whether that's on Windows, which is what I'm using on this laptop, or if it's on an Apple machine, or whatever. Most of the time you guys are probably using Microsoft Word. I believe you can get access to that through the school. I, guys, I've been using it for years. I use Google Docs. They all work basically the same. However, there's almost always little differences throughout. Mainly, the menus are set up a little differently. Things are in different places. And again, they're not super different, but it's just different enough to where some of the things I show you on Google Docs, it's going to be called the same thing, and it will probably even look the same on Microsoft Word, or I shudder to mention Pages. Please don't use Pages. Please just don't. If you're using it now, just use Google Doc. Use anything else. Don't use Pages. Ugh. But anyway, they all work round about the same. So anyway, MLA, how do you go about setting it up? To begin with, there's a couple things. You want your font to be Times New Roman 12. Mine is set there by default because I'm a nerd. Usually, especially in Microsoft Word, I believe it still defaults to Calibri 11. So you want to change that. You want your font to be correct. Most of the rest of this is fine. After that, you want to, all right, you want it to be double spaced. Okay, and I actually have to go. Oops, sorry. I actually have to go back in here. Make sure these are turned off. Turn that off. Essentially, what I'm doing here, and again, this is one of those things that will look kind of different in different word processors. In Microsoft Word, for instance, it has a thing called. I want to get the language just right for you. It's it's extra space between paragraphs is what it calls it. And it's going to be a little checkbox in the paragraph dialog menu. And I know I just said a lot of words at you that probably don't make much sense. Namely what it is, I'll give you an example. So I'm just going to type nonsense, okay? And when I hit enter, oh, it's not double spaced. See, I've already screwed something up. Okay, hang on. I said double. Why? Oh, I know. That's because there's text down here. There's a big reveal going to happen later. Get excited. Anyway, all right, now it's double spaced, right? And you'll notice, because I hit enter, that tells the word processor to start a new paragraph. You need to tab over for paragraphs, but look, we're all good. It's double spaced. By default, though, word processors, because they're not set up for double space, they're set up for single, will every time you hit enter, it'll give you like an extra half space between your paragraphs. So you have to turn that off. That's what I just did here in Docs. Sometimes these will be turned on. You want to make sure they're off. They are here. And I did turn that off, but it's turned back on because this thing is fighting me. Anyway, that'll turn off those extra spaces. Sweet. And actually, when in doubt, you can select everything. And yeah, all right, we're good. All right, so our spacing is good. Our font is good. Let's go back to the top. The other couple things we got to do to set this guy up. You want to insert what's called a page header. I can't talk and read, so hang on. Oh, there it is. Headers and footers. We want a header. You want to right align your header, and the easiest way is, well, I'm thinking this is Word. Sorry. Let me find it on this menu now. Is that it? Sweet. Right align. All right. You want your last name. That happens to be mine. Space. And you got to go back to insert. You know what? I'm not sure where it's at on Docs, actually. Oh, no. Oh, no. You're going to watch me struggle for a second. How fun is that? Wait, there it is. Maybe? No. Damn it. Page numbers. Oh, my God. All right. Header, show on first page, starts at 1. All that looks good. All right, apply. All right, what that's going to do, if you do it correctly, which is what I just did on Docs, pane 1, obviously, that's our first page. You scroll a little bit. Pane 2, see, everything is as it should be. If you don't do it correctly, which is to say, if you just type the number, it's fine on the first page, but then it's going to be that way on every page, okay? So again, you have to go through the trouble of inserting, and I've lost it again. Oh my. Oh, because it was in format. What a weird decision they made. Anyway, all right. On Microsoft Word, that will be in the header and footer section. You click on that, and it gives you a whole sort of new menu up here, right? And there's an option where you can insert page number at current position, which is what we basically did. When in doubt, I know some of this is super kind of in the weeds. You can Google this stuff. There's like 30-second tutorials on all of this, how to insert page number in a header on Microsoft Word, how to any of that. You Google that. There is a very, very dry video out there for you that can walk you through the steps and help you figure it out. But anyway, that's what that should look like. Okay. The other thing we got to put in for MLA, this has slightly different names. I always just call it a title header because it shows up on your first page and nowhere else. Also, some people get confused. It's called a header because it is, but it does not go in your header section. If you do that, what we're about to type up will end up on every page, and that is incorrect. Anyway, what are we talking about here? So you need a header. It's 4 pieces of information. It's your name, but in this case, I'm typing it, so my name. You need a professor. I'll just choose one I had way back when. Okay. So again, this part would be you. This part would be me. It also looks like is there an extra space there? Anyway, then you want the class. So in this case, English 1101. I think one of my 1101s is like E06. Okay. And then the date. Here, I would always recommend just using the date that the assignment is due. Okay. So for instance, the date we're working with up top there. So January 1. I think I've messed this up already. 2022. You want to double check the format because it's early in the morning. I'm doing this before my kids get home. They spent the night with their grandparents. I'm not convinced that format is quite right, but I will not ding you for that. The point here is that I'm trying to stress these 4 pieces of information should start your paper. And notice here, again, we didn't do them in the header, right? So all we have is pane and the page number at the top of every page. And on your first page, you have this header just like that, and you're good. Okay, we're almost done with MLA, I promise. You hit enter one more time. We're going to do a title. That would be centered. I don't have a title right now because I have no paper whatsoever. All right, you hit enter one more time. You want to change the alignment to the left. Hit tab, and that is where your paper starts. Okay? Again, I understand none of what I just went through was fun. Believe me, it wasn't fun to talk about for like the 5 or 7 minutes, however long that was. But if you do this at the start of every paper, it's just out of the way, right? You just get it out of the way. When it comes to the rubric, there is a section on there, and I'm using my memory here, but it's worth around about 10 points. And it's stuff like formatting, which is what this is, and length of the paper, and things like that. So Yeah, it kind of kills me honestly when people like really screw up MLA. It's an easy thing, right? Like it's not again, it's not fun, but it's easy. Give yourself those points, right? Set all this up at the top of your paper every time, and then you're rolling, right? Another thing I've seen people do, you can have a document like this just set up that you save, and you just copy and paste. You just Control A, Control C, and just paste this into your next paper, change what you need to change, and you always have the formatting set up. There's also MLA templates that you can Google. I have one on CourseDen even, all kinds of resources, but I'm asking you to set yourself up for success in this one regard. Okay, so the rest of what we're going to talk about now is actually it's called Quotation Workshop. I'm going to scroll here, and I don't know what all my formatting shenanigans might have done. Did it move it way down? Holy cow, moved it way down. All right, I'm going to fix that. I'll just put, you know what? I'll put it up here where we were. All right. So we have a quotation here, and with everything we're going to talk about, I actually want you to go watch a little bit of the movie real quick. So in just a second, I'm going to ask you to pause this video, pull up Netflix. It's just a scene. It's not. It's maybe 2 or 3 minutes long. It's nothing intense. To tell you where we're at in the film. These timestamps are approximations, unfortunately, because the laptop I'm using, uh, it's not giving me great timestamps for some reason. The quotation here, I felt like I was launching a revolution or something like that. This is from Tristan Harris. This is when he's talking about, well, you'll see when you watch the scene. But anyway, he says this fairly early in the film. The quotation itself occurs around about 10 minutes, 4 seconds in to the film. Okay, but the scene, just so this makes more sense, starts right around 8 minutes and 10 seconds. So if you would pause this video, go pull up the movie, get about 8 minutes in, watch that whole scene for me. Again, it's 2 or 3 minutes long. It's not crazy. Um, and at the very least, watch from the start of the scene to this quotation, if you could do that for me, and then come back. I'll give you a beat to do it. So go, go. All right. Hopefully, you paused the video, went and watched that. Not a big ask, I feel like. If you didn't, you're just bumming me out telepathically, I suppose. But anyway, all right, let's see this. Um, to begin with, I actually want to talk a little bit about the writing here. So, number one, and look, this is a very small piece of writing from one of your classmates, okay? Um, Oh, and also I should say, sorry, I know I'm kind of all over the place a little bit, but I was just reminded sometimes some people get their feelings hurt when we do this work. Um, that's never what this is about. I am honestly trying to help everybody, not just the person we're looking at, but I'll tell you this: if this is your language here on the screen, one of you out there, this is your work, right? And you're kind of like, oh my God. Number one, unless you tell everybody for some reason that this is your work, they have no reason to know that. You are truly anonymous, okay? So don't worry about it. Number two, I know that may only help a little bit. It's still not fun to have your work talked about in front of other people. But the reason I do this is because you're not the only one with these issues, okay? And I promise that, like, if I point something out in your work, it's because other people are having that same problem, and this is just a good example that we can all use to get better. Okay, that's all this is ever about. So to begin with, we'll just read it. In the exposition of the movie, the origin of one of the interviewees is shown. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist for Google, vocalizes, and then we get that quotation. It felt like I was launching a revolution or something like that. Pretty decent quotation. Before we can talk about that, let's talk about what leads up to it, right? Our context here. I guess we'll go, there's two sentences, so we'll go sentence by sentence. In this first one, in the exposition of the movie, already I feel like we're having a bit of an issue that I see a lot in early writing. So in 1101 especially, but also in 1102. And the way I've thought to characterize it is a lot of you guys just try too hard. My theory on that is just because of how much I see it and when I see it, like the classes I see it in. Um, it seems like you're getting encouraged to do this in high school. Like maybe your teachers or something are impressed when you try too hard. Um, Here's what I mean. This word is not used correctly in the exposition. That's not what that word means. Um, Later, when we say vocalizes, that's not used incorrectly per se, but given how the sentence is built and the other language in the sentence, it's really loud. And what I mean is it draws attention to itself. It almost feels like they said, Tristan Harris, a former design analyst of Google, says, and then they just right clicked and found a synonym, and that sounded fancier. But it stands out against everything else. It draws attention to itself in not a good way, right? The best writing, like if the whole tone of these two sentences matched vocalizes, then fine, right? But it doesn't, and it just feels like you kind of slap something on there. The reason I point all that out, it kind of underscores your inexperience as a writer, and the reason you don't want to do that, right? Like the best advice I feel like I always give students like you guys: fake it till you make it, right? I want to train you because you're all inexperienced, right? You're young, that's how it works. I want to train you to, in some ways, look like a better writer than you are, you know? And if you do that enough, eventually you just become a better writer. Like it's how it works. But for now, some of these easier things we can try to limit. We'll get to vocalizes. I want to talk about exposition first. Exposition, that's just not what that's the way the sentence reads. That's not what that word means. I'm not quite sure what they're trying to say, but that's not it. I think maybe they mean in like the beginning of the movie or the early part of the movie or something like that. Um, but even so, we don't even necessarily have to have this whole section. You know, I mean, we could, but we don't have to. Um, More to the point, when we actually start talking about the subject matter, that's what I'm concerned with. So the origin of one of the interviewees is shown. We have some passive voice here. Um, this will probably come up again pretty quickly in the semester, so we'll spend more time talking about what passive voice is. But basically, anytime you have a noun and then a to be verb, which is like is, are, were, things like that, you can look up to be verbs if you like. But the point is, this phrase is clunky as hell. It just doesn't sound good. And again, it may feel like I'm nitpicking, but it won't sound good to anyone. So anyone that reads your work, when they come across a sentence like that, they'll stumble on it. It'll stick out, and it kind of it kind of breaks the spell. Like good writing is like a spell. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of fall in with it, and you're just reading, and it just runs, and it just works. But this is like a wrench in the middle of that. Okay, so it's going to distract your reader. So we want to limit that too. Well, how do we do that? Rather than even fixing this, I'm gonna highlight the whole sentence. What are we really saying here? You know, like if we only have a sentence or two, give or take, to provide context for this quotation, we want to make sure we're providing good context. To me, this feels like pre-writing because we get way more specific in the next sentence, right? We say the origin of one of the interviewees is shown. Well, then we name who that interviewee is, and I think we do a pretty bang-up job talking about his quote-unquote origin here. So, yeah, let's just step one. Let's cut that. And look, cutting some of your work can be painful because I mean that's just length of the paper disappearing in front of you, right? But a lot of you, again, I write like this. Everybody writes like this, but especially students who are still figuring this stuff out. Oftentimes, you will think on the page. You will write a sentence or two, even sometimes, and you don't realize it, but you're kind of just trying to figure out what you want to say, and then in the next sentence, you will say that thing much better. And that is, for the most part, what we've done here. Okay, so I just deleted that first sentence. Now, of course, I still want to change this. I'm not super in love with that, but that's the kind of the minimum states. I can live with that there. All right. We still haven't gotten to the quotation, and we're still not, because we have one more thing to talk about. Okay. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist for Google, states that's pretty good. We're very specific, right? We talk about who he is, and then we even double down and like kind of what he does, right? Like why his opinion matters in the documentary. Excellent. Okay. However, hopefully you went back and watched that scene. The question always with a quotation, how do we arrive at this quotation, right? Like, where did it come from? Yeah, it came out of this guy's mouth, but why did he say it? Do you know what I mean? So for instance, all this information is great. I think we need more. Uh, what revolution is he talking about? You know, he said he launched it. So what did he do? We don't have that information here. So what happened? Well, in the scene, he's talking about he is working at Google and he has these concerns about what the technology might be doing to people, him as well, like because he's involved in it too. So he makes a presentation and he sends it out to, I think he says 15 to 20 people that he worked with, but then it kind of spreads really quickly. And all these people all across the company, you know, Google's a big company, are emailing him and saying, I feel this way as well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes and like has a meeting with higher ups, which, you know, I mean, so it's this whole moment early in the film. We miss all that if we don't give that as context here, right? So an easy fix, again, we can leave that here if you like. Um, Although actually we may need to start with Tristan. Or how about Tristan Harris, former executive for Google, um, felt what was he specifically mentions it's too addictive. um, all right, something like that, right? What have we done? We took their very specific details, which are good. We just added to it. We described the scene, right? Why does he say this? Well, to begin with, according to Tristan, he says it because of this. He felt this idea, right? And obviously he feels like that's a bad thing. So then we still don't have enough information to say what this revolution is about. Well, it's this. He makes a presentation talking about that idea. It catches on with everybody. That's what the revolution is. It's not like Tristan himself feeling a certain kind of way. That's one guy who's upset. You need a bunch of people to be upset to have a revolution. Okay? So it's this. But we had to build to that idea. We needed more information. We got it up here. Cool. Now we've set up this quotation properly. And look, that sentence we deleted, it's longer now. Even better, right? Okay. Two more things I want to cover in this video because I want to build to your homework for next time. Okay. Number one, thinking about what this paper is. We're performing rhetorical analysis, and I've said once or twice now already in different videos. It's not even what they say that's important, but the really important thing is how they say it. The idea he's communicating here, his literal idea, this revolution, um, is this coupled with this, right? That's what he's describing in that quotation. Well, we've already said that. And if that's all we did, we'd be writing a book report, right? Like we're summarizing the scene here. The other thing we got to focus on, how does he communicate this idea? He doesn't say it like we just did. He says it felt like I was launching a revolution or something like that. if we're going to talk about quotations, and that's what we're doing here, you want to focus on language, specific language, but also significant language. In this quotation, and again, you can pause the video for just a moment if you need to, but when you look at this quotation, what language stands out against everything else, right? I mean, one of the most important pieces of language to me seems like revolution, launching one, right? When you think of a revolution, what do you think of? Um, I mean, I have a 6-year-old who's mildly obsessed with the American Revolution, so I kind of think about that. But no matter what it's dudes with guns, sort of rising up against other dudes with other guns, right? But it's that notion. It's not just fighting. It's not just soldiers or any. It's rising up. It's overthrowing some kind of power structure, right? Like that's any movie you've seen with like rebels, Star Wars, any of that stuff. It's always that. So it's a really powerful piece of language. Why does he say it like that? So, all right, to begin with, you can always start with the super obvious after a quotation. Obviously, Harris, we don't want to use his last name. Obviously, Harris um, is with the current structure. I'm kind of just feeling this out. Is dissatisfied with the current structure. I'm not super in love with that sentence, but oh, it wants me to add a yep. But that's okay. All right. Obviously, that's going on, but that's going to introduce our argument, right? Because we're going to say something about that. We're going to talk about how he's communicating that idea by phrasing. Oops, sorry, I can't talk and type. By phrasing. Okay. So all we've done at this stage, we've signaled to the reader, we're going to focus on the fact that he says it like this, that he uses, in this case, this word. It doesn't always have to be a single word. Sometimes it could be a phrase. So, I mean, launching a revolution, if you thought that gave you a little more to discuss, you could do that, but I'm just doing the word here. Okay. So what does that really do? Phrasing this concept as a revolution. Um, what what associations or emotions or anything, what does that kind of build into the idea he's already trying to communicate? How does it move you as a member of the audience? Do you see what I'm saying? um, I mean, if I'm thinking about myself and kind of how I picture people watching this. Oh, sorry, a cat just snuck in. Anyway, um, I mean, revolution feels powerful in a way. Like, I mean, I guess I'll put it to you this way. The ideas he espouses in this moment are things I feel like I agree with, at least to a degree, right? And if that's so, and now he's talking about it like a revolution, it's like, do we even a little bit feel almost swept up in his ideas, his arguments? Do we feel like we're gonna go fight with him, or that the people he's talking about at Google, like he felt like they were gonna go fight with him, they were gonna overthrow some of the what he feels like are bad things these companies are doing, right? Like I think that's what that language gives us. So by phrasing this concept as a revolution, however, um, he what I guess on some level we're describing like an emotional appeal here, right? He builds. Oh, Jesus. What kind of an emotion would that be? If you talk about somebody talking about revolution, like what kind of emotional resonance is that? It's like you feel. Again, I always picture people. like in dimly lit rooms, like holding their heads up high, type, right? Like, and you can hear music in the background almost. That has to make sense to somebody out there. I know I sound like a complete idiot to some of you, but um, it's stirring. I can't think of better language than that, but like you feel right, if that like you're on the right side of history almost. You know what I mean? Like maybe that I still don't know if that's a great way to put it, but that I think that's the emotion he's after when he says this. He builds in almost like, all right. I think that's what I was trying to say with my dumb mouth. Hopefully, that makes a little more sense. But he's by suggesting that he's launching a revolution. He's sort of taking advantage of that narrative that we have about revolutionaries, about rebels. Again, think about most every movie you've ever seen or TV show, anything with a rebellion or rebels or revolutionaries. It's got to what be 95% of the time we're cheering for the rebels, right? You could probably count on one hand any of the things you've seen or read where like you're on the side of the empire, right? Those guys are always the bad guys. The people in power are always the bad guys, right? We cheer for the underdog. We cheer for the rebels. So he's doing that. He's making this feel like one of those stories, and he's one of the rebels. We want to side with them. We want to cheer for them because we just, I mean, there's different reasons we won't get into, but that's a thing we have, you know? And again, it's not strictly what he says, it's how he says it that allows this idea. Okay. Now you could continue beyond this, and this is kind of where we bridge talking about your homework a little bit more. As revolutionaries, the fighting against forces need to be deposed for the greater good of everyone. What's the effect of that? Making a member of the audience feel like that. I mean, if I were to go out on a limb, I kind of think if you feel like you agree with him even a little bit, and now all of a sudden he's suggesting you're part of this larger revolution, uh, hell, right there, it's not just that you're fighting the good fight, that you're on the right side of history, all that stuff, but you're part of a movement. You know, you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're not alone in this. If you have these thoughts or you agree with these thoughts, we could talk about any and all of that. Further, that's one I like a lot. Further, um, the inclusive. Gee, I told you I can't talk and type. Sorry. Right? Awesome. And look, all of this. All of that. That's our analysis. Okay. Your grade is won and lost with analysis. You want a bunch of this in your paper. And all we've done, we've just talked about this word. That's it. But we've talked about the associations that word carries, the in this case, I think emotional connection or associations that this word carries, right? And we could go on, but I have one more thing to talk to you about. But that's how this paper works. Okay, you need to provide proper context. We had about half of it. Oh, sorry, I'm struggling. All right, we had about half of it. Okay, but we needed more from the scene itself. We got that. We had a good quotation, as it turns out, properly cited, all that. So we're gold there. And then from there, Our first sentence, we just sort of restated his idea, which is fine. Okay. And then the rest of it, we actually focused on specific details from the quotation, and we use that to build our analysis. That's how the paper is going to work. All right. Last thing I want to point out to you, I mean, if it's not clear at this point, we've basically started building a body paragraph. Um, some of your body paragraphs, occasionally, if you really run into just like stellar evidence, whether it's a quotation or something from a scene, what have you, some of those body paragraphs could be built from a single piece of evidence. That happens. For the most part, though, you guys are going to focus on like, two pieces of evidence probably to build a whole body paragraph, which is fine. And for that purpose, I want to actually highlight something else from the scene that we've been looking at. That's not a quotation, right? So you couldn't even really cite it for this homework. But I just want to make sure I underscore for you. Again, this is a film, so it's a visual medium. So there's other things going on, not just things that are said, right? In this case, in this scene, if you remember, and again, if you haven't watched it yet, just go watch the damn scene. Starts 8 minutes in, watch for 2 or 3 minutes, then come back. Anyway, Tristan is kind of telling his story over like a cartoon, you know? And I think purposefully they do it in that sort of Google style that all of us, for different reasons, are familiar with, mostly because it's everywhere. But it's like a reenactment, kind of, I guess. Um, you see him walking around work, like getting on a bus, and then he goes home, and all these things. And the fact that they use the Google style, I mean, maybe that is something you could talk about, because obviously they're doing that on purpose. But to me, one of the coolest moments in that scene is he's saying something like, there's 50 engineers in a room that are like running the world, basically. He says 20 to 35-year-old white guys, right? He's describing who these people are. And you just see these giant hands on keyboards. And then all of a sudden, uh, the keyboards sort of fall away, and these fingers have strings attached to them. And then there's this guy who kind of looks like Tristan, I suppose, um, attached to these strings, and they're moving him all around with all these like notifications. Um, that seems pretty important. Like they're puppet strings, right? Um, you couldn't quote any of that I just kind of tried to describe, but you could talk about it in a paper. Uh, and I'm gonna do it very quickly. So first of all, how do we describe any of that? I just said a lot at you. I would never want you to say all of that in a paper. Okay, what you got to do is in a similar way to how we just talked about that quotation up there. What element of the scene do you think is most significant? What element are you going to focus on? To me, it's those strings, right? They're not just strings, they're puppet strings. That's pretty loaded, right? That again, that feels like it's on purpose. They're trying to communicate an idea with that part of the scene. So, um, what the question now is, just like the quotation, how do we get to those puppet strings? Um, also part of the scene. Um, oh God, what have I done? And I'm going to quote it here, but I'm using my memory. In this case, I'm telling you, you would go back and look at the scene and confirm that quotation, because I don't think that's quite right. But for the sake of time, I'm just as Harris describes the engineers, he feels like run the world. Um, Again, I might clean up those sentences a little bit, but generally that's what we're talking about, right? Like that's the moment in the scene. It's probably 10 seconds or so that goes on, and you can't really quote much of that. I got one quotation that I want to check, but I feel like that's again important to everything that's going on. And then you just got to do your best to succinctly describe what it is we're seeing. Um, and I spaced it down because I don't know, that helps my head when it comes to talking about different ideas. But that's enough right now. We would ideally connect these a bit better, but when it comes to a body paragraph, this happens, this moment, like again, maybe 20 seconds before this one, something like that. So they're a part of the same idea. They're a part of the same sort of presentation in the documentary. And again, at this point, we would talk about this moment in the scene in the same way we talked about this one. What's the effect of those puppet strings? What, not just what ideas are they trying to communicate, because that's basically this, right? But how are they communicating it? What does showing these hands connected to puppet strings do to the audience? How does it affect the audience? Um, so, for instance, I mean, I was bothered by it. You know, I personally don't like the idea that somebody might be pulling my strings, and dictating my behavior. That doesn't feel good. Why though? Why does that bother us? How does that affect work? Um, you know, capitalizes upon, again, so much of writing, by the way, is just trying to find the right words for what it is you're trying to describe. So if you ever struggle with this, understand I'm doing it right now. Okay. But again, he capitalizes upon this, the fact that we don't like to be controlled. You know, I'm trying to think of a better way to say that. I mean, I guess that could be good enough. I don't know. All right, one more element of this, and then we'll move on to the end of the video. This is compounded by the disembodied hands. Again, if you go back and watch that moment, it's not just the puppet strings, that's important, but it's hands that aren't attached to anybody. So what I mean here is just seeing hands not attached to anybody, I feel like is a little bit upsetting. Um, so it kind of adds this element to the scene where you're a little bit uneasy. If you see hands and nothing else, you're like, that's not right, because that should be attached to a person. But while unsettling on its own, um, what else does it do to just show hands kind of moving this guy around rather than hands attached to people moving this guy around? Does it make it seem even more nefarious, perhaps? Right? Does that make sense? Um, I hope it does. I think that's what I'm getting at. Is it just feels a little bit like a horror movie or something, just in that one moment. Like it's again intentionally, I think, upsetting. Uh, Okay, so all I've said here, and then we'll wrap up the video, is that those hands uh, being disembodied, how upsetting that is, even if it's only a little bit, further sort of magnifies how upset the filmmakers hope you are by this notion that you're being dictated to, you're being controlled a little bit by these hands, right? So, anyway, what have we done? Well, this is basically your homework. This is basically what I'm asking you to do. I don't know how many words that is. I'll find out for you. 255. I've asked you for around about 500 words, so I want you to just do this twice. And you can do it. Look, all I've done, we found a good quotation. Excellent. We went to that scene and found another moment that's connected to that quotation. And we talked about both of them. We focused on not just what is said, but how it is said. How are we communicating those ideas? And then what is the effect of that presentation? Okay. The fact that he said revolution there is important. Why? Do your best to explain to me why. Uh, the fact that they use puppet strings and these freaky hands to sort of illustrate that idea that Tristan is worried about. What's the effect of that? What does that do to the audience? How does that move you or work on you? And again, I keep saying you. I really mean the audience because it's not like the movie is just made for you or just made for me, right? But anyway, that's half the homework right there. Okay, you just do the same thing one more time than we did it, and you're good. Okay, and I say 500 words. Be in the ballpark of 500 words. I'm not going to be a stickler for that, but all of this, all of our homework is two things. Okay, because for whatever reason, even after I explain it, some people feel like it's busy work. It's not. It's two things. One, some of this will show up in your papers. Not all of it will, by the way, but some of this. So, for instance, the student that turned in this quotation, hopefully she'll watch this video. She'll fix her context a little bit with her words, not mine. And now she has some ideas to run with because we talked about it. But this could show up in one of her body paragraphs, right? That's one thing the homeworks are meant to accomplish is just get you started working on the paper. Okay. The other thing it does, uh, I don't remember her other quotation off the top of my head right now. She may or may not use that one. Say she doesn't, for the sake of an example. It's practice. It's and it's also just taking swings. You don't connect on every swing, right? Uh, but what I'm telling you here is it's better to swing and miss in your homework than in the paper. So I'm honestly just asking you guys take these swings now. Sometimes you connect. I think that's a connection. I think she wants to use that in her paper. Okay. And she'll build on that. And then for whatever misses she may have here in the next couple weeks as we keep doing these, that's fine. Have those misses now, so they're out of your way, and you'll be better for it when it comes to the paper. That's why I'm asking you for the 500 words. This will greatly benefit you, I promise. If you approach the homework in the way that we've done here, your paper will be so much better for it. Anyway, um, I keep mentioning the homework. It's a discussion board where I want you, again, to the best of your ability, just do as much of this as you can. Focus on specific examples from the text, whether it's a quotation or whether it's sort of a moment like we described here. Even if it's a moment, I don't want you to spend a ton of time describing it. I want the bulk of your time spent with this analysis, okay? And the other analysis we had, oh, where was it? Was here, right? Of course, I want you to respond to two of your classmates. I want you to think about their analysis. Do you have something to add to it, like something you feel like they missed, or do you agree, disagree? Why? Do you see another moment in the film that reading their work reminded you of? Any and all of that is applicable. But at this stage, we're kind of helping each other again practice, but also just sort of thinking about what we might do for the paper. Even when you respond to somebody, you're helping out a classmate, which is a good thing to do. But you'd be surprised reading other people's discussion posts how much that can help you jog your memory, make it you think of something you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. these assignments are super beneficial. Okay, so I'm asking you to take it seriously. I think it'll pay some real dividends. Anyway, that's the video for today. I hope it was helpful. As always, if you have not turned in the quotation assignment yet, please do that. Yeah, and I guess just be looking for the next video, most likely on Wednesday. All right, thank you guys. I'll catch you later.